Welcome back everyone to last week's news. This is my weekly news recap show, and in this episode today of the show we have some very big stories today. Obviously, if any of the guys in chat are fans of the old gen Call of Duty series, then you may have heard about the cease and desist letter that X Labs received last night or yesterday, and that's our first story of the day. So let's just zoom in here a little bit. It says from X Labs, today we have received a cease and desist letter on behalf of
World's most trusted news source right here.
On behalf of Activision Publishing in relation to the X Labs project. You are complying with this order and shutting down all operations permanently. Thank you all for your support over the years. Now, this is something that's definitely shocked the Call of Duty streaming world. Let me just get this audio sorted. Mainly because the old gen Call of Duties were like a lot of people's reasons to still actually give a shit about playing Call of Duty. Seeing some of these replies that people are saying don't comply, they're just trying to scare you, look at legal action, fuck Activision. I was pretty pissed off last night as well, hearing about the news. But a lot of people are saying that the reason why they think they're doing it is trying to bully people into not improving the product that was there, and essentially the old gen Call of Duties that were in a way brought back to life through X Labs and IW4X being one of those games in the project. It's essentially a time capsule of how gaming used to be, and especially with all the changes that they're doing now to Call of Duty with like season passes and all that. People are just trying to reminisce and enjoy how the game used to be.
I'm not familiar. Is X Labs what you were playing MW2 through?
It is, yeah. Basically, X Labs was like a launcher that you can play some of the old games through. Like, I think there was Black Ops 2, Black Ops 3, COD Zombies, and
Reroll.
I think Plutonium, which is the Modern Warfare 3 version, was a separate game, not through that client. But essentially, yeah, people are just saying don't buy the next COD game. A lot of people are very upset about it all. But from NECA, who is one of the more well-known trick-shotting guys in the Call of Duty scene, he says that there's still a way to play all of the X Labs clients. But you have to go to this link here to get the IP address to paste it into your console. And I've got that open here. You should just be able to copy that and it should hopefully work, but there have been people saying that they are skeptical or they're wary because there's like issues with user privacy and it might expose your computer to being at risk through doing that. But I might give it a go and see if the lobbies still actually work and you can connect to them, but it's this is definitely like the last nail in the coffin for the old gen Call of Duties, which so many people were trying to revive and keep going for as long as they can. So I think this is basically the end of an era, unfortunately. Also, I've got these new overlays. So the first one is important news, if that works. There we go. Important news. So, the FBI has identified the Zodiac killer, supposedly being Air Force veteran Gary Francis Post, who died in 2018 and has partial DNA sample that could link him to 5 serial murders, cold case investigators claim. Like the music's just a little bit too loud. Okay. Journalist Thomas Colbert has an FBI whistleblower naming the suspect. Gary Francis Post, who died in 2018, has long been suspected by Colbert, and it says a cold case investigator is claiming that the FBI has identified the man suspected to be the infamous Zodiac killer who killed at least 5 people in the late 1960s. Journalist Thomas Colbert alleges that an FBI whistleblower confirmed to him that Air Force veteran Gary Francis Post, who has been previously posited as the killer, is currently listed by the Bureau as a suspect. And he looks like this.
Voice crack.
Just woken up, so I'm a bit... my voice isn't totally warm, but it'll be right. Colbert claims FBI labs have a partial DNA sample on Post, who has been dead since 2018. That links him to the murders, and believes authorities didn't look into him enough when he was alive. The felon has been secretly listed as the Zodiac suspect in headquarters computers since 2016, Colbert's organisation Casebreakers said in a statement. When the Zodiac killer is known to have killed 5 people in Northern California, the true figure is believed to be between 20 and 28 people, while the killer themselves claim to have killed 37 in taunts sent to officials. The FBI has long denied that the long open case has been solved, confirming it remains open as recently as October 2021. The same month, Post was identified by Casebreakers as their leading suspects in at least 5 murders that took place in the Bay Area in 1968 and 1969. On Wednesday, the organization announced that they think they have evidence tying Post to all of the murders, including a 6th victim from 1966, whom the FBI has denied was connected to the Zodiac killer. Casebreakers believes that the federal law enforcement organization has ignored evidence and state laws in their mishandling of the case. Like cops, federal agents are dealing with huge caseloads, constant training, odd rules and bureaucracy, their FBI whistleblower says, according to the group. But when someone wearing a badge or uniform works with others to avoid or hide materials, sidestep difficult procedures, or lie about evidence, they're hurting our volunteers and the thousands of families waiting for answers. In a statement, the FBI's San Francisco office told Fox News that the case remained open and unsolved, but provided no further comment, citing respect for the victims and their families. Now, Casebreakers is demanding a review into both local and federal law enforcement's handling of the case, also referencing the victims and their families. And I believe it continues on for a little bit here. So that'd be definitely interesting to see if something eventually comes out saying that, you know, this guy is the actual the killer who did all the murders and that sort of thing. But whether or not they go public is a different thing. especially for the families and all of that. Next story, Apple's next major product is so good, experts claim, and we could get a glimpse at it within weeks. Early review of the upcoming Apple VR product suggests it would live up to the hype, and the Apple headset is expected to be unveiled in June before a release in September. So good. Apple's next major product is mere weeks away from launching, and an early review suggests it will live up to the hype. Palmer Luckey, the 30-year-old American entrepreneur and founder of the Oculus VR platform, appears to have tried the device. Luckey, who sold his firm Oculus to Meta for $3 billion in 2014 at the age of 21, simply said in a tweet on Sunday, "The Apple headset is so good." Official details about Apple's device are scarce, but it's believed it will display notifications, messages, directions, and more in front of the wearer's eyes. It's not known how or where he got to try the device, although Luckey is a big name in the VR industry. Mail Online has contacted the entrepreneur for more information. Luckey, who began Oculus when he was just 15, is a video game enthusiast and owner of a defense company called Anduril Industries, founded in 2017. More recently, he devised a headset called Nerve Gear that instantly destroys the brain of the user when they die in a virtual game. What the fuck? Thankfully, Apple's new headset, which is expected to be called Reality Pro and released later this year, will not be quite as deadly. I mean, I don't think you'd get many people buying that at all. Publicly, Apple has made no acknowledgement of the upcoming device, but its existence is an open secret within the tech industry. A US leader called Mark Gurman, who has been drip-feeding information about it in his weekly newsletter for months, says it could replace the iPhone. Reality Pro will be launched on Monday, June 5th, the first day of Apple's 5-day worldwide developer conference, Gurman claims.
In before dies because of lag.
He'd have to have like pretty good ping. Surely. I think I need to move that up there actually. Yeah. I had the chat on the wrong it was below instead of above the background there. That's weird. Alright. I mean, I can't really see many people walking around with this strapped to their face. That's something that you do in the privacy of your own home, surely. However, Apple's promo image for WWDC this year features curving, coloured lines that look similar to the curved shape of a headset.
People on death row can fight each other at tilted towers.
Reality Pro will be released to stores in September, around the same time as the company's next iPhone, Gurman has said. The headset will start at around $3,000, jeez, which is around twice as much as some of the priciest smartphones on the market now. Reality Pro will overlay digital images of real-life surroundings, technology known as augmented reality. Not reality. But it will also be capable of virtual reality, meaning it will project entirely virtual elements without the real-life background. AR layers computer-generated images on top of an existing reality, Pokemon Go being a famous example, while VR is wholly virtual and mixed reality combines the two. Whether it's notifications, messages, or map directions, wearers will be able to go along the street and constantly see their device interface in augmented reality without having to take their iPhone out of their pocket. I mean, that's just making laziness attached to a price tag, really. When the wearer is stationary, the device could be switched to VR, ideal for playing games, watching movies, or having conversations with avatars online. It's pretty interesting, I guess. Now to world news. World news! This one's coming out of New York City. It says New York City is sinking due to weight of its skyscrapers, new research finds. I'll do that later. City is sinking approximately 1 to 2 millimeters each year on average, worsening effects of sea level rise and flooding threat. New York City is sinking in part due to the extraordinary weight of its vertiginous buildings, worsening the flooding threat posed to the metropolis from the rising seas, new research has found. The Big Apple may be the city that never sleeps, but it is a city that certainly sinks, subsiding by approximately 1 to 2 millimeters each year on average, with some areas of New York City plunging at double this rate, according to researchers. This sinking is exacerbating the impact of sea level rise, which is accelerating at around twice the global average as the world's glaciers melt away and seawater expands due to global heating. The water that flanks New York City has risen by about 9 inches or 22 centimeters since 1950, and major flooding events from storms could be up to 4 times more frequent than now by the end of the century, due to the combination of sea level rise and hurricanes strengthened by climate change. A deeply concentrated population of 8.4 million people faces varying degrees of hazard from inundation in New York City, researchers wrote in the new study published in the Earth's Future journal. The authors added that the risks faced by New York City will be shared by many other coastal cities around the world as the climate crisis deepens. The combination of tectonic and anthropogenic subsidence, sea level rise, and increasing hurricane intensity imply an accelerating problem along coastal and riverfront areas. This trend is being magnified by the sheer bulk of New York City's built infrastructure. The researchers calculated that the city structures, which include the famous Empire State Building and Chrysler Building, weigh a total of 1.68 tons pounds? I don't know. Which is roughly equivalent to the weight of 140 million elephants. That's another way to put it. This enormous heft is pushing down on a jumble of different materials found in New York City's ground. While many of the largest buildings are placed upon solid bedrock, such as schist, there is a mixture of other sands and clays that have been built over, adding to the sinking effect that is naturally occurring anyways along much of the US East Coast as the land reacts to the retreat of huge glaciers following the end of the last ice age. It's not something to panic about immediately, but there's ongoing process that increases the risk of inundation from flooding, said Tom Parsons, a geophysicist at the US Geological Survey, who led the new research. The softer the soil, the more compression there is from the buildings. It wasn't a mistake to build such large buildings in New York, but we've got to keep in mind that every time you build something here, something there, you push down the ground a little bit more. In 2012, New York was hit by Hurricane Sandy, which flooded parts of the subway and caused widespread damage, including power blackouts. Then, in 2021, Hurricane Ida flooded areas of the city, causing several people to drown. I did not know about that. Scientists say both events were worsened by the effects of global heating. Parsons said that New York and other coastal cities have to get planning for this. If you get repeated exposure to seawater, you can corrode steel and destabilize buildings, which you clearly don't want. Flooding also kills people too, which is probably the greatest concern. Got a town planner in the chat as well. Maybe you could get commissioned to work on the New York City sinking problem. Another interesting story from North America says 1/3 of Canadians fine with prescribing assisted suicide for homelessness. Roughly the same number, top of the poll, they were fine with approving MAID, I don't know what that stands for someone whose only affliction was poverty. So I guess they're just killing homeless people now. Okay. 1/3 of Canadians are apparently fine with prescribing assisted suicide for no other reason than the fact that the patient is poor or homeless. The results were contained in a recent Pew Research Co. poll probing just how comfortable Canadians were with the current state of the country's medical assistance in dying regime. Starting in March 2021, Canada became one of only a handful of countries to legalize assisted suicide, even in instances where a patient does not have terminal illness. Ever since, a Canadian man can be approved for medical assistance in dying simply for having grievous or irremediable medical condition. Some of the way these articles are written is just so... it's pretty shit. Research Co. found that 73% of poll respondents favoured the current regime and only 16% opposed it. That's a pretty big consensus. Pollsters also found not insignificant numbers of Canadians who favoured assisted suicide in cases where no medical condition of any kind was present. This is what's going on in Canada? Like, okay. If a Canadian's only affliction was poverty, 27% said they would be fine with legalizing that person's access to MAID. Another 28% pegged homelessness as an appropriate bar to qualify for MAID. And 20% of respondents were fine with MAID being handed out to anybody for any reason. In other words, 1/5 of respondents agreed with the sentiment: medical assistance in dying should always be allowed, regardless of who requests it. Like a death cult going on. So strange. Notably, these most absolutist supporters of assisted suicide were pretty evenly distributed among age groups, regions, and even political demographics. 20% conservatives, 20% NDPers, which I don't know what that means.
All my homies hate Canada.
Maybe it's in like National Democratic Party or something. And 22% of liberals were in always be allowed camp. One of the more controversial aspects of MAID has been a number of high-profile cases in which Canadians with serious illnesses opted for death only after years of failing to obtain proper medical care. Which I guess, you know, if your medical system isn't set up efficiently or properly, this is like the logical conclusion: just offer them death instead of solve their problem. The Research Co. poll found a slim majority of respondents who were fine with this too. 51% endorsed inability to receive medical treatment as sufficient reason for an assisted death. It's not the first time that a poll has found
it's easier if we just kill you, TBH.
Literally. It's not the first time that a poll has found significant numbers of Canadians willing to expand MAID well beyond its original purpose as a form of euthanasia for the terminally ill. I mean, I get it for if you've got a terminal illness and you don't want to suffer through it, but for like poverty and not being able to get medical care, that's pretty disturbing. In February, an Angus Reid Institute poll similarly found 61% of Canadians favouring the country's current MAID regime. Canadian comfort with MAID may explain why it so quickly has become more widespread and liberalised than in almost any other jurisdiction offering legalised assisted suicide. I mean, maybe that's what they've done. They offer it first under the guise of, oh, if you're terminally ill, but then they later on sneak in like other reasons that make life like not the most comfortable. Canada is notable for its relative lack of checks on the procedure. MAID can be approved and administered by nurse practitioners, whereas most countries require the approval of a physician. Canada is also experiencing a skyrocketing rate of MAID deaths well beyond anything experienced abroad. While only 2,838 Canadians opted for assisted suicide in the first full year of legalised MAID after it became legal in June 2016, as of last count in 2021, that has risen to just over 10,000 people, an increase of 32.4%.
Greater than only.
Over just the year before. What was that? Oh yeah, only 2,000 people. That's still a pretty big number. The practice of referring or recommending assisted suicide has also spread well beyond the traditional boundaries of the healthcare system. Notably, MAID is routinely practiced within the Canadian prison system, despite similar measures proving deeply controversial in Belgium, a pioneer in assisted suicide legislation. Nevertheless, a majority of respondents to both polls did show hesitancy when it came to Canada's eventual plan to extend assisted suicide to citizens whose only underlying condition is mental illness. Which I would hope that's like a
Imagine
key
if
part.
2K people assisted suicide here and our media was like, well, it was only a whole town's worth of people M8.
Yeah. That's like, yeah, like a whole few suburbs really. I mean, it is good that there is hesitancy for like mental illness. But for the other reasons like poverty, Jesus. Just 31% of Angus Reid Institute respondents thought it was a good idea. Among Research Co respondents, 43%...
Get a job, KEK.
43% backed MAID for the mentally ill against 45% who did not. That's almost the majority of people. MAID for the mentally ill was supposed to become legal in March, but in one of the only instances of Canada pulling back on its rapid expansion of assisted suicide, that date was ultimately pushed forward into 2024 in order to prepare for the safe and consistent assessment and provision of MAID in all cases. I think that there would have to be a special department and like heaps of funding put into this if you're going to legalize it. So you have facilities set up, people that are well trained in it, and you know, they know what they're doing. They're not trying to take advantage of poor people or mentally ill people. The Research Co poll surveyed 1,000 adults between April 22 and 24. The data was statistically weighed according to Canadian census figures and Research Co says the margin of error is plus or minus 3 percentage points 19 times out of 10. So there's a little bit of a margin of error. Now we move on to Australian news.
Crikey!
Australian news. We've got the case of Claire Nowland. New South Wales Police's decision to tase a 95-year-old woman leaves community gobsmacked. This is a story that I was hearing a lot about over the weekend. Just how ridiculous it is. Disability advocates outraged at heavy-handed response, while Greens MP says incident should mark turning point in police misconduct reviews. About a week ago, Claire Nowland was in a hospital bed knitting needles nearby, chatting with one of her daughters and Coomer's local parish priest, Mark Croker. Croker recalls the great-grandmother was about as frail as one would expect of a 95-year-old. He also recalls her gentle nature and her deep appreciation for his visit. She went skydiving in 2008. That's amazing. She was there with her daughter, one of her daughters, and we had a good little conversation between the three of us, he says. She still had her knitting there and was poking along with that to keep herself busy. A very nice lady, a deeply appreciative lady for whenever I visited her, a very respectful lady, and one who the church community here held in very high regard. I mean, she seems pretty sweet from the pictures. She's in critical condition as of Friday. The peaceful scene shared so recently makes the events of Wednesday morning all the more incomprehensible. In the early hours of the morning at the council-run Yallumby Lodge aged care facility, police used a taser on Nowland, apparently due to the risk she posed to their safety. Yes, a 43-kilogram 95-year-old lady with a steak knife. That's a big threat to cops that are probably like double her weight and size. That's so stupid. Nowland, who suffers dementia and weighs 43 kilograms, was advancing on them at a slow pace with a walking frame, but also holding a serrated steak knife, according to police. The threat was so grave, police decided, that they needed to deploy one of the most serious use of force option available to them, bar drawing the firearm. Not doing that. Nowland fell back, smashing her head and leaving her with critical injuries. She has been in Cooma District Hospital in the 2 days since, her family by her side dipping in and out of consciousness. She has not been moved to the main trauma centre for Southern New South Wales, Canberra Hospital, and police have deemed that the incident to be in most serious category available, used to denote the risk of imminent death. Croker says he was left gobsmacked when he heard the news. It does leave you rather gobsmacked as to what has happened, he said. My role is to walk with my community now. As Nowland's family and the community worked through their shock and grief, questions have already turned to the police response. She had a walking frame, but she had a knife. Cooma doesn't have a 24-hour police station, so when the nursing home called police at about 4:15 a.m. Wednesday asking for help to deal with a resident with a knife, the force had to call in off-duty officers. Paramedics were already on the scene by the time the officers, all with more than a decade of experience, arrived. Nowland at some point had left her bedroom, walking into the kitchen and picking up a steak knife. By the time police arrived, they say she was in a small medical treatment room by herself. Body-worn footage, which police will not release, captured the next moments in their entirety. probably because it would make them look bad. Police say they tried to de-escalate and get Alan to drop the knife. They say she advanced on them. She did so slowly and with a walking frame. At the time she was tasered, she was approaching police, it is fair to say at a slow pace. Peter Cotter, the New South Wales Assistant Police Commissioner, said on Friday, she had a walking frame, but she had a knife. It wouldn't be too hard to disarm her. Cotter said she was unable to transport myself to the mind of an actual officers or officers involved. I can't take it any further what was going through anyone's mind with the use of a taser, he said. That is for them. Police have also revealed that the senior constable responsible, an officer of 12 years experience, has been taken off duty. His duty status is under review. Homicide squad investigators have been brought in as part of a critical incidents response team.
Easy to say without body cam footage, but I assume they didn't even attempt to disarm her. They would have went verbal and then taser.
Well, yeah, I mean, until there is the body cam footage released, can't really say anything definitely, but, you know, a 95-year-old, it wouldn't be hard to disarm her. You could just, like, I don't know, grab her arm or something, do some... They've probably got training for this to disarm people with knives, but someone that's 95 years old and just over 40 kilos should have been a key part of handling the situation.
Someone sneak behind her, then grab her arm, lol.
I mean, literally, you could do that. Where was I? Homicide squad investigators have been brought in as part of a critical incidents response team. Their investigation will be reviewed by professional standards and monitored by the Law Enforcement Conduct Commission. New South Wales Police were less than transparent in the 24 hours after the incident. They released a statement saying only that an elderly woman had been injured in an interaction with police at an aged care facility. As more detail emerges about their conduct, outrage among advocates such as Nicole Lee, the president of People with Disability Australia, has only grown. It's becoming more and more alarming the more we are told, she said. Okay. It's pretty clear that the response in this case is too heavy-handed and completely inappropriate and not warranted in relation to the situation that they were faced with. Of course it's too heavy-handed. I mean, if my nana, who's 95 as well, on Sunday, were to approach me with a knife, I'd be trying to disarm her in as least lethal way possible. I mean, sure, you might want to like punch the arm or something to make her lose her grip, but that's a lot better than tasing her and making her fall back and like hit her head. This is just ridiculous. Lee said it was clear that the police were not properly trained to deal with people in crisis, including those suffering dementia. It really does highlight the fact that police are coming into scenarios like this and clearly they don't have enough training behind them or support behind them to de-escalate a situation for someone who is in mental health crisis or experiencing confusion or distress, including due to dementia, she said. The case has also revived a perennial concern in cases of potential police misconduct. How can the public be confident in police investigating police? Cotter said that no one, not even police, was above the law and sought to ease fears about the investigation's independence by saying it would be monitored by the LECC, an independent watchdog. But the Greens MP Sue Higginson warned the LECC lacked an adequate budget and resourcing to properly investigate the vast bulk of complaints it receives. She said the incident in Cooma must prove a turning point. An internal investigation is simply not good enough, she said. We're seeing a pattern of police response that is causing harm rather than de-escalating situations and providing the necessary care responses to some of our most vulnerable people. The New South Wales Council of Civil Liberties voiced similar concerns. Police should never investigate police, the council's president Josh Pallas said. The New South Wales Ombudsman and the Law Enforcement Conduct Commission should initiate an inquiry into this because it transcends issues of police powers with mental health and ageing. Bronnie Taylor, a resident of the Cooma region and deputy leader of the New South Wales Nationals Party, said the mood in the tight-knit community was somber. Tight-knit town was somber. She said in time the community will want answers, but for now their concerns are focused on Nowland's health and the family. Is it Nowland or Noland? Everybody is talking about it. Everyone is very upset, she said. There are concerns about the level of force used, and we need to rely on the process to look into that. Croker only arrived at the parish in recent months, but he says it has become clear to him that Nowland, before her health deteriorated, was an active and much loved member of the church. She did much for the community in earlier years, volunteering at St. Vincent de Paul's and visiting local nursing homes. Now Croker is preparing to do the same, helping his parish through a difficult time. They're strong people who will give every bit of sympathy and support to the family in the way that we do, with prayer, and we hope that with more than anything that it brings us closer together as a church family, he said. She definitely seems like a sweet lady. This one's a pretty local story. South Australian man dies in descending Mount Everest. An Adelaide man who learned to walk again after spinal injury has died after successfully reaching the peak of Mount Everest while on a charity expedition. Jason Kennison, 40, died on Friday, his family said in a statement. He achieved his goal of reaching the peak. He stood on top of this world, but sadly didn't come home, they said on social media. He was the most courageous, adventurous human we knew, and he will be forever missed. An expedition organizer told the Himalayan Times Kennison had been assisted from the summit after becoming unwell before collapsing on a platform below. Poor weather conditions had prevented rescuers from reaching him, and Kennison, an engineer from South Australia who had been living in Perth, faced years of rehabilitation after being seriously injured in a 2006 car crash. A routine spinal procedure 3 years ago resulted in complications including spinal nerve damage, which forced him to learn how to walk again for the second time. After all the setbacks and injuries I've had, it was a spinal cord injury that changed my life, and I wouldn't wish it upon anyone, he wrote on a fundraising page for the expedition. Although I feel grateful with the extent of what I suffered in comparison to my other injuries, it is traumatic, difficult, and requires incredible resilience to get through. However, I'm going to make most of my life, and part of that involves helping other people who have had their life changed in an instant through spinal cord injury. They shouldn't be forgotten, they should be helped. Kennison had been raising money for support organisation Spinal Cord Injuries Australia, which confirmed it was aware of his death. In a fundraising article he wrote on the justgiving.com site in March, Kennison said that he aimed to reach Everest Base Camp and hope to continue to higher camps of the mountain from here. Whilst I wish to complete the ascent to challenge my body both mentally and physically, my main reason is to raise funds and awareness for Spinal Cord Injuries Australia to help people like me living with spinal cord injury to live their best life, he wrote. So that's a very, in a way it's a sad story, but it's a happy story, being that he was able to walk again and accomplish something so great as climbing Mount Everest. Okay, this one's a fairly recent story. This was, I believe, what day is that? Last Thursday. Extinction Rebellion shutting down Flinders Street in the Adelaide CBD. Of course, previously they had also shut down North Terrace, a little bit away from the Royal Adelaide Hospital, which is, of course, exactly what you want. Especially with how busy that hospital is. I'll play this video as well.
There have been more chaotic scenes in the city as Extinction Rebellion protesters targeted the Santos headquarters in Flinders Street. As Hayden Nelson reports, the Premier is being urged to fast-track tougher penalties for demonstrators who cause mass disruption.
The protesters had promised more disruption in Adelaide, and this morning they well and truly delivered. The Extinction Rebellion protesters spray-painted white and black paint across the street front of the Santos building on Flinders Street just before security and police quickly arrived on scene.
Stand up for me, mate. You're gonna have to loosen those cuffs.
At least 4 people were taken into custody. Specialist police themselves ended up smeared in white paint, trying to bring the group under control just before 8 o'clock. The vandalism using a high-pressured paint gun caused the road to be shut down in the middle of the morning peak, as police tried to keep themselves and members of the public safe. Now, while their target is firmly on oil and gas companies, it put a dent in the morning trade at Frankie's Coffee on the bottom floor of the Santos headquarters, damaging a window. They say they'll consider seeking costs.
It's affected us by about 20-30% down from last week, so it's obviously affecting us a bit. I understand that they're trying to press how they feel and trying to express what's happening in the world, and I understand that, but there's a way of going about that.
The state opposition wants penalties for obstructing a public place increased from $750 to a maximum of $50,000 or 3 months jail.
$750 for causing mass disruption at peak traffic times across our city just doesn't cut it.
Now, despite the widespread condemnation, another protest is planned on the steps of Parliament later today.
There's a few things that I thought of while watching that. The first thing is how they didn't highlight if they're being charged for vandalism, like spraying the paint on the outside of the building, especially a big company.
Be fun
like
to go to
Santos.
one of these things swinging, but I have too much to lose over a bunch of NPCs.
And the other thing is like, yeah, these are the people that would supposedly be like kind of maybe socialists or something like that, and they're actually harming a small business in the Adelaide CBD, which, you know, rent cost that would actually absolutely kill them to have a dip in.
These losers get away with everything.
Pretty much, yeah. And then it links over to the Premier's tweets saying, "We're introducing new penalties for dangerous and obstructionist protesters who cause huge disruption and threaten public safety. Peacefully protesting is a fundamental part of our democracy, but some of what we've witnessed..."
State-sponsored idiots. Yo-based.
"Some of what we've witnessed in the past 24 hours isn't acceptable. Protesters don't have the right to cause huge disruptions damage businesses, and put the safety of the public and emergency services at risk. I acknowledge the efforts of the opposition in working with the government on this matter in a bipartisan fashion. So I just hope that with the legislation that comes through, it doesn't diminish the ability to protest, even though I don't think protesting really does much these days, except for make people that are onlooking maybe not agree with your message, or they just start to not care because you're being a bother. So whether or not anything good from this will happen, or if it'll change the way that Extinction Rebellion conducts their protests or demonstrations, is to be seen, pretty much. Okay, and now we're on to serious news. Serious news. Inside the drama of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's New York City paparazzi chase ordeal. This was a pretty big story that I heard of recently. It's a pretty long article, so I'm going to just read half of it, I reckon. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle raised alarms on Wednesday about a near-catastrophic, more than 2-hour paparazzi chase through Manhattan, drawing comparisons to Princess Diana's fatal 1997 crash, even as cops said the supposed ordeal wasn't nearly as dramatic as the couple claimed. So interesting that there's two conflicting bits of information there, but I guess that's if they want public attention, they have to dramatise it a little bit, I guess. The high-profile yet photo-shy pair said via their rep that they were subjected to a relentless pursuit by a ring of highly aggressive paparazzi after leaving an event at the Ziegfeld Ballroom in Midtown on Tuesday night. I mean, paparazzi can be pretty aggressive though, you've got to give them that. This relentless pursuit, lasting over 2 hours, resulted in multiple near collisions involving other drivers on the road, pedestrians and 2 NYPD officers, the spokesperson said. Asked about the statement at an unrelated press conference, Mayor Eric Adams branded the incident reckless and irresponsible, invoking Harry's mum Diana's name. I don't think there's many of us who don't recall how his mum died, the mayor said. While NYPD said the incident was under investigation, police also played down the couple's high drama claims, describing a somewhat hectic yet overall controlled scene. The NYPD assisted the private security team protecting the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, a spokesperson said in a statement Wednesday. There were numerous photographers that made their transport challenging. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex arrived at their destination and there were no reported collisions, summonses, injuries or arrests in regard. I thought they didn't have their royal titles anymore. Is it just me? Harry, 38, and Meghan, 41, left the ballroom where the former Suits actress was honoured by Gloria Steinem at the Women's Vision Awards Gala, while her mother, Doria Ragland, around 9:50 p.m, flanked by both a private security car and an NYPD vehicle. So they headed up, in like a little diagonal sort of fashion.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I mean, maybe it's just a news.com.au journalist being stupid again. Right-hand photographer Lee Bernices, who witnessed what happened, told the Post the trio was dodging paparazzi all night at the high-profile event. They came through the back of the Hertz car rental store, so despite the barricades and police presence up front, they dodged the paparazzi and headed through a secret entrance. So many paparazzi were left without pictures. Aww. The witness said of their covert arrival. Later, when Harry, Meghan and Ragland were getting back into their car, the witness said photographers were aggressive but not crazy. When Mogul and Harry emerged, they had someone blocking their faces, so despite the paparazzi waiting for more than 4 hours, none of them were able to get shots, they explained. One eyewitness told Page 6 that the couple's security were being a-holes from the start. They were mocking the paps, provoking them. You expect that kind of thing from security or for rappers or whatever, but with good security, which this should be, you expect them to be similar to Secret Service. These security egged on the paps. So it seems like it was like everyone was at fault pretty much. A group of paparazzi followed the 3 vehicles, but photographers told Page 6 it was a couple's own security that was driving erratically, possibly to shake the shutterbugs and avoid revealing where the California-based couple was staying in the city. Sorry. The pair's team even cautioned the public against accessing photos of the alleged chase, which they said promoted a highly intrusive practice that is dangerous to all involved. Chris Sanchez, a member of Harry and Meghan's security detail, told CNN that he believed the paparazzi put the public in danger, claiming there were about a dozen vehicles, cars, scooters and bicycles chasing them. Yeah. I'll go to the next story because this one's a long one. Pretty sad news here. The iconic "It Ain't Much But Honest Work" meme, David Bryant, has sadly passed away at the age of 76. It says in an automobile accident. David Brandt, known for having been the subject of the viral "Honest Work" internet meme, is confirmed to have died in an automobile crash. He was 76 years old. Brandt was hospitalized over the weekend after being involved in an automobile accident in Urbana, Illinois, and later died due to the result of suffering several serious injuries. Of course, for those familiar with Brandt and the memes surrounding him, they've been known. They know that he left behind quite the legacy. The aforementioned "Honest Work" meme first began circulating in 2012. It ain't much, the meme often reads, but it's honest work. The image and its accompanying statement originated at a Natural Resources Conservation Service event on Brandt's own farm in Carroll, Ohio. Naturally, David Brandt was rather fond of the meme and the impact it had on his work. In fact, he continued to use the meme as a symbol for the work he and his family performed with their farm. The farm, which has consistently belonged to his family, is said to consist of 736 acres of no-till row crops and cover crops. As of this writing, the family involves 3 different generations of his family. The farm involves. Furthermore, Brandt's work extended far past memes and his own farm. He often travelled the country to perform in different seminars and reports where he discussed agriculture and his family's business. As such, the meme is just the tip of the iceberg for what he's accomplished over his lifetime. It certainly goes to show what honest work can do. His company, Walnut Creek Seeds, was owned and operated by Brandt alongside his son, daughter-in-law and grandson. As such, his legacy will continue to live on, and it's quite impressive to see what kind of career he's led. Perhaps saying it ain't much is an understatement. David Brandt's obituary can be read below. Ohio agriculture has never before known a global cultural phenomenon quite like David Brandt of Fairfield County, who passed away at the age of 76 from complications resulting from an automobile accident. He was known around the world as the face of a meme associated with honest work. In agricultural circles, Brandt will be remembered as a global leader in no-till cover crops, soil health, nutrient-dense crops, and direct marketing. Agriculturalists from around the world visited his Fairfield County farm each year to see his soils firsthand and learn from his many years of experience. He also travelled the world speaking about his farm. Brandt was a Vietnam veteran who returned home to farm in the late 1960s, but soon after his return, Brandt's father died in a farming accident. He and his wife, Kendra, who passed away in 2020, were forced to sell the farm and start over with very little equipment. No-till was a way to reduce costs, but since Brandt's use of no-till and cover crops has increased soil organic matter and decreased input costs dramatically. He has served as a conservation mentor to many. He farmed and operated in Walnut Creek seeds with his son, daughter-in-law, and grandson. Very sad news there. Pro wrestling legend superstar Billy Graham, dead at 79. Of course, superstar Billy Graham is from the WWE's golden era, alongside people like Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Andre the Giant, that generation of wrestling. Pro wrestling legend superstar Billy Graham died Wednesday. He was 79. Graham, whose real name Eldridge Wayne Coleman, had been dealing with health issues for decades before things took a bad turn in February. Ric Flair broke the news of Graham's death, which was confirmed by TMZ. The superstar Billy Graham just left us, Flair tweeted. "Thank you for all your influence on my career." Graham had been on life support in the ICU to deal with numerous infections, organ failure, diabetes, and other ailments that required emergency surgery earlier this month. His wife Valerie posted Monday morning on Graham's Facebook account that the doctors wanted him removed from life support, but at that point she had refused. Let me just mute the server. Okay. Okay. Graham is a three-time former world champion professional wrestler, including a 1977-78 title run in the WWF, which I believe is Worldwide Wrestling Federation, the New York Territory promotion that eventually became WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2004. Superstar Billy Graham, one of my first teachers of the Heat, the Iron Sheik tweeted, "The real legend Bubba. He loved me, I love him. Together we hit the gym and shook the earth. I love you forever brother. Rest in peace." A bodybuilding friend of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Graham got into pro wrestling in the late 1960s with Stu Hart's Stampede Wrestling in Calgary, and wrestled until 1987 until injuries and health issues pushed him out of the ring. Graham, who moved into a commentary role, wrestled for AWA, WWF, NWA, and WWF during his career, which is pretty standard really for Bushwhacker Bush. It's pretty standard for wrestlers to wrestle in a lot of different different promotions. He was dubbed Superstar during his time in the AWA. Graham won the WWF Championship from Bruno Sammartino in April 1977 and held the belt for 9.5 months, losing the title to Bob Backlund in February 1978. Bruno Sammartino was one of the longest reigning champions of the WWE, I guess you could say, as a umbrella term. I think he had it for like 12 years, which is it can be a bit repetitive, I think, but it will be definitely if you got a top guy, you want to have him there for the whole time. Graham's look and charisma influenced generations of wrestlers to come, including Hulk Hogan, Jesse the Body Ventura, who was previously like a governor of California or another state, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Scott Steiner, and Flair, among others. He was known for using the word brother in promos, something that became a staple for Hulk Hogan his entire career. Graham, who was a steroid user, became a loud voice against drugs, especially during the 90s when Vince McMahon was embroiled in federal steroid trials, causing a rift between him and the WWE boss. Fences were eventually mended for his Hall of Fame induction. He is survived by his wife and 2 children. We have a report from the Cradle here. Over 4.5 million people killed in post 9/11 wars. A blank check legislation signed into law in 2001 has allowed the Pentagon to launch more than 40 military interventions in at least 22 countries without congressional approval. A new study from the Costs of War project at Brown University's Watson Institute estimates that over 4.5 million people have died from wars launched by the West in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks. This study estimates that between 906,000 to 937,000 people have been killed as a direct result of wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Syria, Yemen, Libya, and Somalia. These countries have experienced the most violent wars in which the US government has been involved in the name of counter-terrorism since 2001, the report highlights. Moreover, 3.6 million people are estimated to have died indirectly from the effects of Western wars, including economic collapse, food insecurity, destruction of public health facilities, environmental contamination, and recurring violence. However, the researchers go on to stress that the true impacts of war are so vast and complex.
Since when have we started to refer Israel as the West?
True. Going to stress that the true impacts of war are so vast and complex that they are unquantifiable, and thus the report does not generate a precise mortality figure, but instead provides a reasonable and conservative estimate. Yet they say 900,000 and the title says 4.5 million. I think I might skip this actually. It's probably just mainly for the start bit here, but Queen Elizabeth II, her funeral and 10 days of mourning cost the government £162 million. Queen Elizabeth's funeral and events during the period of national mourning cost the government an estimated £162 million, the Treasury has said. The state funeral on 19th of September 2022 came 11 days after her death. During that period of national mourning, hundreds of thousands of people visited Westminster, where she was laying in state. The Home Office, £72 million, and Department of Culture, Media and Sport, £57 million, spent the most. The costs incurred by the government departments relate to Queen Elizabeth's funeral and other events in the run-up, including the monarch's lying in state. John Glenn, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, said the government's priority at the time had been to make sure that these events ran smoothly and with the appropriate level of dignity, while at all times ensuring the safety and security of the public. In a written ministerial statement made to Parliament, Mr Glenn said the Treasury had provided additional funding where necessary, and the Scottish, Welsh and Northern Ireland governments were fully refunded for their respective costs. The costs include, I won't read them all out, but basically millions for each of those departments. After Queen Elizabeth died on the 8th of September 2022, aged 96, the UK started 10 days of national mourning. The late Queen's coffin was laid to rest in St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh for 24 hours before the monarch was taken to Westminster Abbey in London, where thousands of mourners queued for hours to pay their respects. People lined up in London at all hours of the day, often in chilly temperatures, to pay their respects, including David Beckham. Sorry. The wait time at one stage was estimated to be more than 24 hours, and the queue snaked from Westminster Hall down along the River Thames and stretched south for almost 7 miles or 11 kilometres. The scale of the state funeral and the mourning arrangements led to what police described at the time as being the biggest operation we're likely to launch in the UK. World leaders and foreign royalty joined the royal family for the state funeral at Westminster Abbey. Members of the 2,000-strong congregation included the Queen's great-grandchildren, Prime Minister at the time Liz Truss, and US President Joe Biden and his wife Jill. The event was watched by millions of people across the country and around the world. It was the first state funeral since Sir Winston Churchill's in 1965 and the biggest ceremonial event since World War II. After the funeral, the Queen's coffin travelled in a procession to Wellington Arch, and then onto its final journey to Windsor Castle and a committal service. I think honestly they wasted money on Churchill's funeral with how much of a disaster his efforts in World War I and World War II ended up being. The cost used to facilitate the smooth running of the event and ensure mourners from the UK and across the world could visit and take part safely. The cost was used to facilitate the smooth running of the event and ensure mourners of the UK and across the world could visit and take part safely, Downing Street has said. Of course, a major international event of this scale, we wanted to ensure that we could enable people to pay their respects, a Number 10 spokesman said. And for our final segment here, we have Feel Good News. Aww. Feel Good News. Greece recovers hundreds of stolen artifacts. Greece says it has recovered hundreds of looted artifacts, including a 2nd century bronze statue of Alexander the Great. The trove was recovered after a legal battle with the company of a British antiquities dealer, officials said. Robin Symes has amassed thousands of pieces as part of a network of illegal traders. For years, Greece has been fighting to recover looted artifacts from museums and private collections worldwide. The announcement that 351 objects from Syme's collection were being repatriated after a 17-year legal battle was made by Greek Culture Minister Lena Mendoni on Friday. Ms. Mendoni did not say if the artifacts were linked to the discovery by Italian and Swiss police in 2016 of a haul of archaeological treasures said to have been stored by Symes at the Geneva Freeport in Switzerland. Arguably the most high-profile artworks in the debate about whether museums should return items to their countries of origin are the Parthenon sculptures. They were removed by the Parthenon Temple in Athens in the early 19th century by the British soldier and diplomat Lord Elgin. The sculptures were then brought by the British government in 1816 and placed in the British Museum. Talks about their return are said to be advancing. In March, the Vatican returned 3 fragments of Athens' Parthenon Temple it had kept for centuries. Which is pretty cool because in one aspect there's it's good that like the British Museum can hold on to these artifacts and preserve them, especially in countries where like there's civil wars or like ISIS. You see that in like Iran and Syria pretty often. They go to these old ruins and they just blow them up. So it's good to be able to have them preserved somewhere, and then at a suitable time be able to return them back to like places like Greece, and be able to hopefully display them in a way that tourists will be able to stop by and appreciate all the artifacts and have a glimpse into the past.
Third world countries shouldn't have their stuff returned for that reason, TBH.
The reason of like civil wars and that sort of thing. I mean, I agree with that.
Yeah.
If there comes a point where they are developed enough to be able to look after the artifacts in a suitable manner, then they can be returned, but definitely in the state that they are at the moment, like Syria, Yemen, I wouldn't be advocating for returning those artifacts at all.
Plus, a lot of artifacts are made in an era where the native population isn't even the same as it is now, so it's not even their heritage.
True. Yeah, like ancient Egypt, the ancient Egyptians were a lot closer to Greeks than they are the current Egyptian population. And our final story of the day, I believe it's, where's PA? Philadelphia, maybe? Researchers have found iconic bird thought to be extinct for decades. Pennsylvania. Researchers in Pennsylvania have reportedly just spotted a bird that the US Fish and Wildlife Service was considering declaring extinct.
We was Pharos and she'd gimme that gold statue of D.A. white women.
Researchers in Pennsylvania have reportedly just spotted a bird that the US Fish and Wildlife Service was considering declaring extinct because its last unchallenged sighting came all the way back in 1944, according to reports. In an incredible finding, researchers with the National Aviary in Pittsburgh claim that they have captured images of the ivory-billed woodpecker, called an iconic species, on motion-activated trail cameras that they placed in Louisiana. The group reportedly recorded the birds in bottomland hardwood forests. They also reportedly used drones in 2019 to scan the treetops for the birds and their and the techniques reportedly returned numerous images of the woodpeckers. You have very scarce birds that tend to be very
What
high
DA?
up. That tend to be very high up in the canopy in dense forests, and they're very hard to document, and that is a great achievement that they've been able to get the imagery. One of the co-authors of the study, Mark Michaels, reportedly said. Per the report, the fact that the photos were not high quality because of the distances they were being taken from, the group has faced some scrutiny. The US Fish and Wildlife Service suggested declaring the bird extinct in September of 2021, but the group from the National Aviary has told them to pump the brakes on that. We're very confident in our research and in the data and our interpretation of the data that we've gathered over many years, Steve Latta, another of the co-authors, reportedly said. Even so, while it looks like the birds are still here, they still face hurdles if they are to make a full comeback. They already are believed to have a small population and a shrinking habitat of old growth forests. So whether or not they'll be able to prove it once and for all that the species is not extinct is to be seen, I guess. Okay, so that's our final story, and now this is a new segment that I'm running with. Some predictions for next week. What stories do I think is likely to be covered? People in chat will be able to be involved with this as well. Something that I think might be recurring in the news next week. It's probably bad to say, but probably another mass shooting in America.
Israel nuked. Sorry, had to happen.
Probably going to be another mass shooting. As bad as it is to say, it's just, even the last week or so in my Discord, there's a channel dedicated to like trending news and that sort of thing. When I was looking at that on yesterday, actually, basically all of the stories were about either terrorism or a mass shooting. So yeah, definitely not the greatest news story to predict, but I can definitely see it coming true. Over the next week, there being another one. For world news, I could maybe see there being more drama relating to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. What do you guys think? What do you think the next week's news is likely to look like? Looking back at some of the stories.
Trans shooting, CIA hate crime sponsored attack or Jewish teen school shooting on antidepressants labeled as white via media. Pick your poison.
Probably more like further coverage of the Claire Nowland case. Maybe the police will face some prosecution through that. Also probably more information about the newest iPhone and the VR stuff that they're doing there. So definitely an interesting week ahead. As always, I'll be live again next Tuesday at 3 p.m.
Remember how people tried to say Cruz was white? A Hispanic Jew, TFW.
Yeah, as always, I'll be live again next week, Tuesday, 3 p.m. Adelaide time. And other than that, I'll be streaming some GeoGuessr on Thursday night because I'll be busy during the early evening, I guess you could say, from like 4 to 5. But I'll be live hopefully at like 6 or 6:30, that sort of time. But yeah, other than that, thanks for watching, everyone. And
hopefully the news isn't too depressing, honestly.
Yeah.
Adios.
I mean, as always, I'll find some feel-good news and cover like world news, some Australian stories, and interesting top stories. But other than that, I'll be sure to post some interesting stories in the Discord if I find them. Otherwise, I'll be picking from there and the news subreddit as well. But yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. I'll be live on Thursday evening, and until then, have a good day.